we're very fortunate to be joined by Mikhail Floyd-Pruitt, Pam Ricker, and Ashanti Weeks, who are going to lead us on a walk entitled Garden Homes, History and Resilience. Mikhail is serving as our project artist on this walk, multidisciplinary artist and co-director of Homeworks in Bronzeville. Pam is with Clean Wisconsin and program director and staff attorney. And Ashanti Weeks, who was an intern with Artworks, or is an intern with Artworks for Milwaukee, who has done quite a bit of work in the 30th Street corridor. So we have the perspective of the lead artist, we have the perspective of the expert, and we also are going to have the perspective of younger artists to kind of balance it all out. So we're really just trying to explore these new concepts in interesting and dynamic ways. Really appreciative for the people who are on the call. And I think with that, I'm just going to turn it over to you three and Pam for the screen share. And I think we're ready to go.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. It's really great to see so many people on this call, familiar faces and folks from the neighborhood. Hey, Joe is often known as unofficial mayor of Garden Homes. So it's really great to see everyone here. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen and get going on our walk. And unfortunately, I mean, it is too bad that we can't be walking around Garden Homes right now, because unlike New York, it is a beautiful day here in Garden Homes. This walk is one that, you know, Clean Wisconsin, we're actually, you know, physically located here in Garden Homes in the Century City Tower. And a lot of aspects of this walk are ones that we, you know, in the past would do with, you know, people from the neighborhood as well as people from adjacent neighborhoods to kind of showcase the, you know, increasing amount of, you know, art and green infrastructure technologies that we have here in the neighborhood. But we're, you know, have, you know, still a great presentation. I think you'll still get a lot from, you know, from just going through these pictures and talking about them with all of us. So this is kind of just an intro shot. This is actually a community rain garden that was put in the middle of Garden Homes Park, and this was the launching of it a few years ago. And you see a lot of community members got involved. This, I think, kind of just kicking things off here. This is the view of the Garden Homes History and Resilience mural that is on one end of the Garden Homes neighborhood. And I think a theme that you'll hear a lot through the presentation, and I think that, you know, I've heard a lot, Shanti will be speaking to it too, is I think the history of the Garden Homes neighborhood is really important to members of the community. And so this mural kind of talks about, or kind of brings in some of those historical perspectives. We have a couple, this kind of tract here in the middle was kind of a early plan of the Garden Homes neighborhood, which was one of the first housing cooperative neighborhoods in the country. And then we have this Mayor Daniel Hone was one of the early, actually, socialist mayors of Milwaukee. And he was kind of really instrumental in getting this project off the ground. We have the designer of the housing cooperative over here, this gentleman with the glasses, Emil Seidel, who was kind of the designer of the Garden Homes neighborhood. And then we have really kind of long-term residents. So this gentleman up here in the upper right-hand side, he was the first Black police chief of the city of Milwaukee. And then Mama Freeman over here on the left was, you know, she is a pastor was a pastor in the neighborhood, and really an amazing community leader. And then you also have in here kind of some native plants and a rain garden, which bring in kind of the theme of climate resilience and how the neighborhood has really embraced these natural ways to kind of soak up and reuse water as a way to reduce flood risk and you know, reduce water pollution in the neighborhood. So that is kind
Yeah,
of
and
you.
when Pam, when you and I were, you were explaining to me sort of how, rain gardens work and how these different, types of green infrastructure work and what they do with water. You were explaining about how the types of plants that are chosen are, specifically chosen for how like they aid the process, and you described part of that as like a deep root system. And so as I've just like reflected on this process of a lot of discussion around like history and ties to the community and green infrastructure as well, I just found that phrase to be apt, like a deep root system, applying to the people of the area, but also the infrastructure, and sort of starting to move towards that idea of like, okay, how are we tied together exactly?
I love that. Yeah, it's a total, double, triple meaning of deep rooted. I think that's maybe the title of the next mural or the next piece of art in the neighborhood, Kyle.
Oh, thank you. There we go. That's a good idea.
Great. So I don't know, Mikhail, if you want to kind of go through this, you put together this map for us. I think it's really kind of well oriented.
Yeah. So I'm really bad at geography. And even though I grew up really close to this area, just my geography is terrible. So a lot of the time that me and Pam were like talking about locations, I kept thinking they were in other places. And I was like, well, why would we go that way? Because this thing's over there. And I was like, I need to map this because clearly I don't know what I'm talking about. So this just sort of lays out different points of interest that we're going to cover. So you can see on the lower right, there's a little easel, the palette, purple palette, and that was the mural we just looked at. And so then next we'll go up to the top to the Uniting Garden Homes Incorporated Community Garden, which it put an ellipsis instead of the N, which is funny. And then there's artwork there as well, and then move over towards the North Basin, and I put what like the waves to sort of symbolize a water feature, and then go down and check out the East Basin, and then on the way to Green Tech Station there's several bioswales along 27th and Roosevelt, so I just identified those quickly with the flower icon, and so that's where we're walking.
And so, kind of as Mikhail mentioned, this is one of 5 really beautiful murals that are now part of a community garden space on 27th and Ruby. And this was a project that Artworks is really involved in. So I think I'll turn it over to Ashanti to talk about her work with Artworks on these murals.
Okay, hi everyone. So with this mural in particular, if I'm not mistaken, this one is like our welcome mural to our other murals in that neighborhood. With this one, we got the community involved. If I had a backside of the picture, I would have showed you. But on this mural in particular, it has, like for the grand opening, we had stamped the community hands that everybody that to the back of the mural that all was involved in it. So this one is just simply a welcome mural, like, okay, we're gonna come together to unite the community, basically. So it's like a group project with just the neighbors and the interns.
Great, thanks.
This is the second one, I believe. This mural was just talking about the migration to Wisconsin, all the migration that was going on at the time, really. So it wasn't really yes. For this one, this was the redlining about it showed this is like the map of garden homes. At the time, it had the redlining situation, like where you could tell what areas it was really bad in garden homes at, and how they was trying to fix it, how the housing wasn't really fair, and what they was trying to do and express. Like on this mural, you can see the color coordination. Red obviously meaning that was the worst area for fair housing for African Americans at the time. As for this one, this O. Smith was really meant. We put him in this one because at the time this was the one that was giving everybody the most. This one was giving everybody the most jobs at the time during the time for African Americans. They had, even though it was like a factory, but they wasn't really getting paid that much, but it was a job for them to manage and just try to stay uproot really and not go into poverty completely. So that's why we mentioned this one at that time.
Right.
And this one right here is kind of my favorite because it has like the glass stain. It's a little bit of maps. It has different trees and facts in the pieces, but also, as you can see, it's the pictures that below are the actual interns that worked on the project. And then in the middle, the young lady, one of our interns, she had wrote a poem about garden homes and what they can overcome. So this mural was basically about faith. And at the time, she was trying to feel like this is what garden homes was trying to represent. And so that's where we got the faith thing going and positivity, basically.
So I want to ask you guys a question, and this could be for any one of you three. It's really interesting to see them all kind of presented in succession. You know, you get to see a bunch of different murals in the neighborhood. And I'm not entirely sure if they were created around the same time, but I'm guessing that they were. And I'm just wondering, from your perspectives, learning about the neighborhood and seeing these, what does it feel like as far as meaningfulness to the neighborhood, or just things that maybe you learned about each one or about them as a whole?
I would say, I'll answer just real quick. I think, you know, even in presenting this project, when I was approached of like, okay, we need an artist to like talk about green infrastructure, and I'm like, what are you talking about? But it you know, something like these pieces sort of show how a space can just be like christened by artwork, or it can show how the space, you can suggest how a space should be utilized, like what you should do there, or just what the vibe of the space is. And so all of the different messages across this, you know, history, then to here we have, you know, youth interns, just legacy and culture. And so, you know, it charges, artwork can charge a space how you would like it to.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, that's a great, I think that they were, all the art, all of these murals were done probably in the space of about 2 to 3 years. And you know, it was, and probably at like around the same time. You know, and I think you can just really see, again, like the importance of the history of the neighborhood to the community. There are many parts of this neighborhood that are, you know, are historic. So if you want to do renovations and things like that to the home, you have to go through, you know, the specific process to maintain the kind of architectural, you know, specifically architectural different, you know, elements to homes and things like that. And again, it's you know, it's really important to the neighborhood, because this neighborhood actually used to be, you know, one of the more affluent African-American communities in Milwaukee, and maybe even, you know, throughout the region. That mention of A.L. Smith and Briggs and Stratton kind of recalls the manufacturing jobs that were, you know, really available and supported, you know, a strong middle class African-American neighborhood, you know, let's say in the 60s and 70s, maybe into the 80s, but then, you know, later in the 80s into the 90s, you really started to, you know, it was, you know, probably effects of globalization and, you know, different elements that really, you know, the manufacturing jobs left the neighborhood, and that has really, you know, it's had a dramatic impact on, you know, on the neighborhood and the ability of, I think, local residents to buy homes and to, you know, really maintain what was there. And so all of the community work, I think, that is being done, everything's being done in the neighborhood, I think, is really to try to, you know, get more jobs back in and try to kind of recall some of that past and you know, reinvigorate that economic development that really kind of was so key to this neighborhood and why it was so special and why it was, you know, it continues to be, you know, so well loved by residents, and but really trying to, you know, reinvigorate that economic development that kind of was so crucial. And so I just, you know, I think you just see that in so many of these art pieces. And I think we'll continue to in the next place we go. So we're going to,
there's one question from Michael about the colors in the stained glass. And we were curious, Ashanti, if maybe you knew if those colors signified anything or if they were just for visual sake.
I was trying to say, I was just answering that question in the chat.
Oh.
No, honestly, the interns, we just felt like we picked the colors that was inspirational, or like we wasn't trying to mimic, like, you know how the churches have stained glass. We wasn't really trying to mimic them, but we felt like, okay, we have a yellow background. Let's just make it colorful to like brighten up the positivity, basically, the neighborhood. Because if you pay attention, a little bit of our murals, I wouldn't say they was kind of had a negative impact, like spoke of the negative side of garden homes. So with this faith board, we were just trying to bring out more positivity. Like, okay, if we continue to push and have our goals and dreams, this is where we gonna see ourselves in the future, basically.
Very cool.
Great.
Oh, and I just noticed, first of all, I just learned I can be like John Madden on here with this pencil.
Nobody knows who John Madden is, Mikhail.
But how her shirt is like a sunrise or a sunburst, and just, you know, linking together again the notion of infrastructure, green infrastructure, and people linking together of being that sunshine that you know, that helps promote growth.
I love that.
All right, so we're gonna walk on over now to the North Basins.
Oh, 1 second before we start this, there's another good question about murals before we change topics. From Dolmini, when you reflect on creating these murals, have you connected with those community members to see how the process benefited them? So how much interaction is there between the people?
Sorry. Throughout for our works, our main focus in the other nonprofit group, whatever murals we is putting up in a neighborhood, we always wanted to get the feedback of the community. So like with this one, I believe both of the murals all the murals that I'm talking about today, we did get the community involved. We went around surveying, asking them questions like, what would you like to see in your neighborhood? Like for the North Basin, for sure. We walked for like 2 days just throughout to make sure we covered the whole block and just didn't throw up anything. We got their feedback, and they actually was the ones that helped come up with some of the words that you're gonna see in the next murals. So that was our process of creating things. We wanted to make sure whatever we did, we got the community involved, because this is their neighborhood, and we just didn't want to feel like, oh, well, we just gonna take over your neighborhood by throwing this up, if you like it or not. But we really wanted to make sure that since it's about uniting garden homes, we wanted to make sure that we actually got them involved with the situation.
Yeah. And this is the North Basin mural, right?
Yes. Okay, so for these two murals, I'm actually in one of these murals. I think I'm the one in the middle. This was our way of showing that we just like all of our murals, representing, giving credit to the interns at the time. So they know, like the community know these are the people and the young people there that's there in the future to help with the community. And then as for Unity, I believe all the other names was Unity, Peace, and there was one more, I can't remember right now at the time, but the community came up with those. And then we asked them what kind of design would they like. And they gave us a little bit of examples. And from there, we tried to make sure we pleased the community by putting everything they wanted onto the murals.
And Sarah just dropped a really good stat in the chat for people who want to check in on what community engagement looks like and what the numbers of people who are actually directly engaged just by door knocking were.
All right. Awesome. So we'll take kind of a step into the past. And I have to see exactly when this photo was taken, but this was probably taken, I don't know, 2014 or 2015. This is what the North Basin area used to look like. It was basically over here to the left is a business that's still there. It's called Drs Technologies. They interestingly make like the navigation equipment for Navy submarines or something like that. It's a very intense place. When you go there, you have to turn over your cell phone because there's state secrets, all that stuff. Anyways, they had a really two huge parking lot that, you know, that was, you know, we talk about concrete asphalt, that is a type of surface that's not going to let water infiltrate. So when rain falls onto it, it just runs off, and then it runs off into the street, collects all the gunk in the street, and then it goes to the storm sewer system, which in this part of the city, I think not everybody knows, but you know, a lot of the water when it runs off impervious surfaces, roofs, sidewalks, streets, everything, it just picks up whatever is in the street, whatever pollution's in the street, and then it goes to the storm sewer, and then that goes to the local waterway. And so, you know, really what green infrastructure and what kind of all these kind of practices try to do is to try to return the landscape to a situation where the water can be absorbed by the ground again. You want to get back to more of a natural, you know, you want to get back to like grass, or, you know, as Mikhail mentioned, the native plants have that deep root system, and those deep roots really help to just absorb more water. So it's not running off, and it's not, you know, contributing to water pollution, really. You know, a really huge source of water pollution nowadays is really this, you know, what we call stormwater pollution, because it just is a result of, you know, how we've built our community. You know, we do need roads, we need streets, we do need, you know, some things that are not just, you know, dirt or vegetation, but what, you know, things like this huge basin that we're going to look more at, and some of the bioswales, and, you know, just gardens and things like that tries to do is to try to kind of return to the natural landscape that water can soak in and not be running off and polluting our waterways. So in any case, the good thing, you know, kind of the multiple benefits was that when the North Basin was built, it got rid of all this impervious surface here, got rid of all this parking lot, which wasn't needed. And then it created, you know, a huge, you know, basin for water to go when there is a huge storm. And this particular basin actually holds 7.6 million gallons of water. So that is a lot of water. And when we have like huge floods that, you know, I think the most recent catastrophic flood was in 2010. You know, when you have these huge flood events, the water just needs someplace to go. And so that is what a stormwater detention basin like this does. And what the great thing about this particular basin is, you kind of see here in the front that, you know, there is water in there. And there's water in here most of the time. When I walk over there, there's usually water. But if you look behind it, there's all this green space that's there. And, you know, that was intentionally done, or I mean, the way that it's, you know, the way that's designed is so that kind of all that green space that's there, so that if we do have a huge flood, there's some place for the water to go. But most of the time, it's not covered in water. It's just green space, which can be used by the community to, play sports, or, just get onto grass, get onto green space, which, as we know, in a lot of urban communities, green space is limited. So, this was a just kind of layering on benefits. You have a big detention basin that's going to help to reduce flood risk by creating some place for the water to go. Then you have a green space for the community to enjoy. There's, I think, discussions of even a club soccer team maybe making this their home field, which would be really great. And just kind of this green space and trees and plants, just to kind of help bring that vegetation back to the community, and kind of a nice place to look at as well, even if you're not going to go in there. So this was kind of, while they were still getting everything together, getting all the plants in and getting all the beautiful art in, that Ashanti and Artworks team, added to when that was finalized. And this is pretty much what the site looks like today.
And then Aaron, you're muted.
There's no fence was my question.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that was interesting for me when Pam and I were talking about this, and is sort of being able to look at these like before and after images, and just sort of how drastic those changes can be. I remember the house I grew up in, there was a tree like in the, like the tree lawn that had to be removed, and like arriving back there and this tree being gone was just like, yo, what happened? Like, there's always been a tree here, and that's just a single tree. And so we're talking about, whole parking lots or whatever. And so I just think that is an interesting part of, history to potentially be communicated in some way, whether it's through art or some other public like programming.
And thanks for bringing up that point, Aaron, about no fence, because that was, that was really intentionally done. I think so. The Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, which is the entity here that is kind of in charge, they help to manage flood risk, so they help to reduce flood risk. They can't stop floods, but they can help to reduce the risk. So they could have designed these basins in a lot of different ways. And one of them, I remember one of the meetings that I went to, I think back in late 2013, when they were first talking about these stormwater detention basins, they put up a picture of a stormwater detention basin, those very closed off, that had just like a really tall fence around it. And I just remember the community kind of, just the community members that were there just kind of being turned off by that. They wanted something that was going to be accessible, that was going to, add green space, be accessible to the community. And so I really, credit MMSD for listening to those, that community feedback, and really creating a space that was going to be, green space here. And yeah, I mean, I'm sad for the tree that you lost, Mikal, because
the city planted a new one, so there's like a little guy there now. So
still, it takes so long for trees to grow into something that that is going to provide shade, that provides that cooling. That's something that we haven't really talked about. Is there's something called the urban island heat effect. That basically means in urbanized areas where you have less trees, you have less vegetation, you're in these urbanized areas, we have less of that cooling that vegetation and trees provide. So actually cities, can be like 4 to 5 degrees hotter than the areas surrounding them. And that is going to be intensified, with climate change and all of that. So that's definitely another benefit to adding more green space like this back into our urban communities, to like add that cooling element as well. And that's not even talk about, all the, I think there's like physical, mental benefits of seeing green and being around green space in nature. So
We were just here, and now we're gonna move here down to the East Basin. Do you want to say anything else?
Nope. We'll just keep going to.
No, I need to interrupt with this question. Can someone fall into the basin from Charlotte?
The North Basin or which one? I think it's not showing it here, but there is a railing in front of this basin of this North Basin over here. So it'd be pretty difficult for anybody to fall into the area that actually has water into it. And sorry, yeah, this would be the benefit of being out in person. We could kind of pan over here. There is like a walkway. There's a couple of walkways like down into the basin for people to be able to walk down and in. And you know, the way that they've planted it is not like a stark like cliff that you would fall off into the basin. It's kind of, you know, kind of comes in at a curve with more vegetation, so it kind of, you know, curves in, and so they can make it safe for community members. But it is a good question, because that is why in some places a fence is necessary. But in this case, it wasn't really necessary with the amount of water that was going to be held in these.
And
if that's the Charlotte, that's my mom, we can take a walk around there sometime, Mom. I don't know if there's two Charlottes on the call. Who knows?
I believe it is the Charlotte that is your mom, with matching last names, and I love that idea.
Yeah, so yeah, but there's totally walkways down, but it is a good question. Those fences are needed sometimes, but so jumping over to the East Basin, we want to again kind of give the before and after. So these homes along here, so this is North 30th here, and thank you so much to Ethan, my colleague who found this picture on Google Maps actually. I believe this was from 2014, 2015. So where the East Basin is basically used to be a block of homes that got continually flooded out when there were these big catastrophic flood events over here. And it just got to a point where again, they're being flooded in every storm. They, you know, were, you know, full of mold and really just kind of not healthy places for people to live in anymore. And so the sewerage district, you know, did talk with community members and did purchase the homes at a good, fair, you know, value, and did, you know, also I think Northwest Side CDC was also involved in helping to, you know, relocate the families nearby to homes that were not going to be, you know, constantly flooded out. So, you know, instead of, again, having these homes here that were, you know, continually having these issues, they were purchased and the stormwater detention basin area was created there to be able, again, to collect water when we have these huge storm events. And you can see this was after a pretty huge storm event here. I think that this was from 2018. When, again, I mean, if you think about it, the water is going to go where it wants to go. And so before this was here, you know, this was, again, impacting a lot of the homes. And if people, I think a lot of people here are from Milwaukee and are familiar with this area. If you were to go over here to the left, this is around like 31st or so in Capitol. And there's a railroad bridge. And underneath that railroad bridge, this area, you know, again, MMSC is helping to like manage and reduce the flood risk, but it's still an area that since I was growing up, this is an area that always got flooded. There's, you know, whenever there's a huge storm event, there's flooding under that bridge. And so this is an area that has, you know, had these impacts for a really long time. And again, now there's this detention basin here, which helps to reduce that risk. And this one actually holds 1.7 million gallons of water. You can see this detention basin is like even more accessible to the community. There's this gravel path here for people to, you know, get out, take a walk their dogs, what have you. But yeah, this is East Basin.
Yeah, and that's just another good example of just sort of a major drastic change occurring in an urban landscape. Like, I think that's something that we don't see that frequently, or at least the removal of things. We see the addition of things, and you know, so just seeing that, like, wow, a block of houses had to become something else, and like what's sort of the narrative behind that. And so that's been part of what's been interesting of this process of, one, just learning about what are all these different things, but just, you know, what happened that led to this, and how does this help, you know, maintain people's lives. And, you know, maybe people were displaced because those houses were moved, or, you know, people lived there, they had to figure out their situations, but how is this also helping improve the situations of the people remaining in the neighborhood? It just, you know, brings up a wide complexity of sort of scenarios and interconnections between, again, like water, greenery, and us. So,
and there's some good chats happening or good messages circulating in the chat about the murals, right? And Lauren just mentioned that it's not just about the product, it's also about the process. And I think here too, right? Like the process really informs the narrative, and helping to understand what brings us from starting point to end point, that in between, regardless of what we're talking about, is kind of, you know, almost the more important piece of the puzzle.
One thing I wanted to mention here is this kind of green infrastructure is great. You know, it takes care of this huge amount of water, but it costs millions and millions and billions of dollars to construct, and it displaces people. It can be a great amenity to the community. But when we talk about the citizens, the residents of communities being part of the green infrastructure of the city, what we're thinking about is, okay, if there is the threat of a sewage overflow into Lake Michigan or into the rivers, and everybody takes a break from using bathtubs, I'm sure a lot of kids would be happy they don't have to take a bath at night. Dishwashers, washing machines, any big uses of water. It's this pretty amazing way to retain this huge amount of water without major construction. It's not going to solve the problem, but it could really be a great addition. So that's what we're talking about with having the water markers that we put in communities that flash when there's a chance of an overflow. That's what we're talking about.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, and I think, you know, there's examples sort of later of sort of just the different scale of interventions, and like you said, how can these all contribute to each other? You know, it's adding them all together, and so yeah, there's definitely, you know, ways that people, like you said, a little kid could argue to not take a bath, you know, all the way up to these multi-million-dollar constructions. And so I think that is that is certainly an interesting point of just, again, the variety of intersections that exist in you know, thinking about stormwater pollution and so forth. So this is the East Basin, and one of the things that's super interesting, or that like jumped out to me, is like, and there's a similar structure at the North Basin, but like this sort of like pavilion plaza area, like to me looks like the deck of a ship or something. Like it looks like an observation deck, or and so, you know, for me, it just starts to bring up, like, you know, different ideas of like how a space like this could be like utilized. Like if we think about the uses of like, okay, what would people be doing if they were on the deck of a ship? You know, maybe there's a luau, or maybe they're just watching the sea, or just watching the birds in this case. And so, you know, just a way of being inspired by, you know, just like visual relations that sort of pop out sometimes.
And this kind of does end up being a observation deck of sorts into the wildlife that's actually in that detention basin. A lot of times, you know, a lot of ducks and geese, and we saw some animal that I think was like a muskrat or something. I don't know. You see some interesting stuff in there, let me tell you. And actually, so this deck is something we'll be talking about next. This kind of like brickwork is actually an example of permeable pavement, which is another green infrastructure practice that's used a lot in urban areas. And what's really great about this is you have the kind of sturdiness of like a pavement, but underneath this and underneath this is kind of like layers and layers of rocks. And then between the bricks is where the water infiltrates in between and then helps to just kind of fill in. So again, it provides kind of like the sturdiness and the structure of a pavement, but then it still allows for the infiltration of water. And so all that material was used on here. And it, kind of helps to demonstrate the kind of stormwater technology to people in the neighborhood, which is, this is right next to the basin. This right here, this was during a walk. I mean, we would do these green infrastructure tours throughout the Garden Homes neighborhood to kind of show community members the different scales of kind of like green infrastructure technologies, or this idea of returning the land to more of a natural state so that you can have that water infiltration. So the big scale is like these stormwater detention basins, which hold these millions of gallons of water. Then you have these kind of intermediate scales, which are in the public space. Here in this case it's an alley. This is a green alley. As I mentioned, all these little bricks in here are permeable pavement. The water can infiltrate in between those little gaps and go underneath, and just be stored there. And again, this is a way to really reduce the stormwater pollution, which would be created in just a normal alley, because the water would just be collecting, all the oil and grease and skunk in the alley and just be running off to the storm sewer, and then making its way to the rivers. And here in Milwaukee, all of our rivers eventually lead to Lake Michigan, which is a source of recreation. Still fishing done, and I mean, ultimately it's a source of our drinking water here in Milwaukee. And it does get cleaned again, before it's pulled out of the lake. But, we're just trying to get to a place where we really recognize that, all the fresh water on earth is the fresh water that we have, and it just gets cycled through and it gets cleaned and all of that. But let's try not to get it as dirty. I think it's kind of the idea. So this is a green alley. And again, these are popular. Residents really like these. There's like a geothermal effect when it snows. It kind of like helps the snow to melt a little bit faster and just go down. So they have a clearer alley as well. And the engineers in the Milwaukee Department of Public Works have really gotten kind of this whole green alley thing down to a science where they can, it's not more expensive to do a green alley than it is to do a regular alley. So now they just do, when they're going to redo an alley in the city of Milwaukee, they just do a green alley, which is great, which is awesome, and kind of shows how Milwaukee is really a leader in these green infrastructure technologies. People in Milwaukee never leave, you might not, or if you're not involved in like kind of the environmental or green infrastructure world, Milwaukee is really kind of well known for being a leader in these green infrastructure practices. So another source of pride for all of us, which we always need in Milwaukee.
Yeah, so just to sort of piggyback off that, and when we were discussing that notion and you were explaining that to me, Pam, I found it super interesting that there's these things right nearby that you were saying could be exported to other cities to help them solve their water problems, and just something you might just walk over every day and not realize this is a cool aspect about my neighborhood. There's different things that are appreciated in neighborhoods like mom and pop's bookstore and a coffee shop, you know, when people are trying to move to places, and it's like, yo, these innovative green infrastructure is like, you know, another really interesting thing that I think if more people, you know, understand, then if more people are aware of, you know, their surroundings, it can become like this source of pride, and specifically like thinking about bringing attention to things, like these different water features, like looking at the permeable alleys, like reminds me sort of like hopscotch or something like that. And so I was just thinking about like the possibility if like, you know, if there are different colored bricks, or if bricks can be laid out in different patterns, you know, you could spell out words in there, or, you know, some way to start to bring people's attention to this thing, to even just notice like, wait, so this, something about this is different, you know, and then maybe at some point, you know, put two and two together, or encounter a source of information. But, you know, sometimes just with creativity and artwork, it can be a way to like at least plant the seed of larger conversation.
Mikal, I think I just want to jump in here and say, you know, this is one of the reasons we think it's so important to involve artists in projects like this, because I feel like artists have a way of helping to, they can be in a, you know, if their interests are in this direction, help decode an environment. You know, that idea of bricks and the color of bricks, getting people to notice things that they would otherwise just, I mean, who's going to pay attention to an alleyway? So I think that it's just emphasizing, you know, the importance of this kind of imagination that an artist can bring to our environment.
And thank you. And that just sparked another idea, just to take a step further, you know, just expand my artist mind. We could do permeable bowling alley. If we're connecting games, that'd be a good one. Anyway.
I'm biting my tongue to tell you a bowling story, but I'll save it for another time.
So kind of on that theme of like this kind of green infrastructure in the public right of way, kind of at that intermediate, at that kind of medium scale. This is one of the many bioswales, which when we say bioswale, it's basically, I mean, you can think of it as, it's like a huge rain garden, basically. It's just a different way to say it, you know? And so this is right along Roosevelt Avenue, or excuse me, Roosevelt Drive. And you see here, you know, this is kind of like a depression in the ground, so it can hold water in there. But again, you see these purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan are the yellow ones over here. And these are native plants, plants that are native to this area. And they have a really deep root system, again, that helps to soak in the water. That deep root system helps to improve soil health as well, by helping to like kind of break in and you know, compacted soils helps to break that up a little bit. And then the other huge thing, which we haven't even talked about, is you know, because they're native plants, they are really a help to the pollinators in our area. So the bees and butterflies and, you know, different animals that pollinate our plants that we need to be able to eat food and things like that, you know, and you know, unfortunately, for a number of different reasons, our pollinators are like in decline. And one of the reasons is, you know, probably not as much native plants being used. So that's another really great element of bioswales, and everyone should go out, if you have space, make a rain garden or plant your native plants, you know, just gonna, you can't go wrong. It's really great. And, you know, what is cool about, you know, this project is like everybody, you know, the more people that are involved, the more you're helping to create a solution to, you know, reduce stormwater pollution, reduce flood risk, help the pollinators, improve soil health. It's like all of these, you know, we talk about it as a triple bottom line benefits, you know, all these environmental benefits, economic and social benefits as well, because things like this, is think about it, like something like a bioswale, it actually needs to be tended to, so you need to have a semi-skilled workforce to be able to tend to these. And, just brings beautification to the neighborhood and all these, all these additional benefits.
And this is, so sort of, again, sort of thinking about ideas of like, what are some visual ways that we can, sort of explain like the narrative that is in front of us that like most of us like aren't seeing. And so let's see if I can draw here. So I'm working on like an idea with Northwest Side CDC. Sorry, my screen's probably shaking. But so sometimes the sidewalk is closer to the actual bioswale. But, so I'm thinking about like a visual of like, okay, what if there's like on the sidewalk, we spray paint the image of, a cloud, that's a cloud. And then we have raindrops coming out of the cloud. And then these raindrops eventually curve towards the bioswale. And then there's an image of, the black-eyed Susan here so if someone's walking down the sidewalk, they'll see this cloud and be like, like, why is there a cloud here? And then, follow these raindrops. And so again, just a way to like plant the seed of, in the minds of people of starting to notice things about this green infrastructure. And so this is something that it might be a like temporary installation, but should be happening later this summer. Yeah. And I promise the drawings will be better than that.
They don't have to be.
I love that because, there's like, usually there's signs up in some of the bioswales, but I think if you were to do that, that would help people understand like, why is this bioswale here? It's here to collect the raindrops. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and we need those different levels of communication. So even just directing people towards the sign or sparking that interest, right? So, just trying to pick several ways of getting people to just visually engage and then, participate or whatever after that.
There's a question here from Jessica that talks about, do these types of landscape improvements, do they inspire more community cleanup efforts? In your guys' experiences, have you seen that?
I think they do. Yeah, I think they do. And again, this is neighborhood beautification, and it's not going to look very good with all kinds of garbage and stuff like that in there. So it really, I think it does spark that. And sadly, like one of the things, these obviously have to be maintained by the city, and one of the things that one of the pieces of maintenance that has to be done most often is, it's garbage retrieval. So I think it starts to help to bring about that conversation of like, we need to get back to, a situation where people are recognizing, you can't litter, you can't, this is, trashing, the community and honestly, it's more visual this way. A lot of, trash and stuff can get into the storm sewer system as well. So, I mean, it is, even though you might see it in here, it's better, honestly, that it ends up being in a bioswale than going into the river eventually. It's harder to clean up and get out. But yeah, I would say that it has sparked more community cleanups and neighborhood pride.
I think that's an important side benefit of this type of work. And I do just want to say, in the interest of time, I know we're at time. I'm not rushing you guys at all to finish. I know there's just a couple more left, but I want to encourage people to, chat's been pretty active. So if you have questions, feel free to ask the questions, and we can get to them. If you need to jump off, we understand. But Mikal, Pam, and Ashanti, this has been great. So please take us home.
All right. So yeah, and this is kind of just going back to that whole theme of the different scales of kind of these types of practices. This is probably the smallest scale. So this is a rain garden in somebody's yard that they chose to host, and it really helps to infiltrate a lot of water coming from their rooftop. And then what's great is the water comes off the roof and it just automatically is watering your native plants here in the yard. And then our final stop is over here, Green Tech Station, which I know we had a lot of participants who were actively, worked really hard on this great project with Northwest Side CDC and Reflow, City of Milwaukee, probably other partners I'm leaving out, but this is a station that is, has already incorporated different elements of green infrastructure into the space. And so will be kind of an education space to come in, bring different groups, students, probably landscapers who don't know about green infrastructure. This can be a site where they can come in and they can learn about these different types of green infrastructure. Go to the next picture. So this here is, a structure that then again can be used if this site wanted to be, used for community gathering space or things like that. But right back here, going down here and behind it, there is a 20,000 gallon cistern right back here that was built under the ground. Maybe somebody can throw into the chat. Maybe I think Sarah was there, and I know Justin was there, but maybe you can throw into the chat how many people came together to put together that cistern system under the ground. Shoot, we should have included a picture of that too, but it's these huge kind of black crates that kind of are assembled together and help to, hold that water and that infiltrates into the ground, and then it holds that water underground. And so that's just a couple of the different green infrastructure technology in here. Another great green infrastructure technology are trees, stormwater trees. They soak up a lot of water as well. So I think as this space continues to get developed and more open to the public, look out for the opportunity if you're here in Milwaukee to check it out and get in there. And I think.
Yeah, I'll just add, while I was working on this project and we're looking at places to highlight on the walk, the phrase, Green Tech Station kept coming up, and I didn't understand that it was Green Technology Station of Learning. I was just like, what is Green Tech Station? Was that a new bus stop or something? I was like, oh, it's a station about green technology. Okay, so it's going to be, developed ideally into a space again where people can, engage and learn about these different technologies. And I think for me, sort of the summation of this experience, well, we're going to do some more stuff and artwork, but, this phase of the experience has just been doing a lot of thinking about, our connections to water and how do we communicate to others. Because I learned a lot about what these different things are. And these are things that I've walked past and driven past and just had no idea. Just okay, there's lots of parks in Milwaukee. I guess there's flowers and medians in Milwaukee, it's, but then I start to learn that it's, this whole more involved thing that is, like Pam said, it's about maintaining the health of our water, maintaining the health of our lakes. And, water is on the basic needs list, right? It's a basic need of human living. And so just through that, we're more intimately tied to our infrastructure by the fact that our infrastructure is what delivers the water and what, determines the quality of that water. And so, water being a need, if we can play a deeper role in taking care of that water, I think that's, something that people would be excited to take advantage of. And that's something that Pam mentioned as well, of just, there are residents that are getting involved at that grassroots, no pun intended, deep grassroots level of rain barrels or helping with, construction or just, and so I found that really like reassuring that like, okay, this is a cool thing that people can get into that can cultivate that culture and history that we've previously seen in garden homes.
I think that was beautifully said. We got some hearts coming up on the chat.
Well, thank you all for listening to us, and
Yeah.
peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here. Really appreciate all the great questions and discussion.